The candles guttered in their silver sconces, casting trembling shadows across the grand dining hall of Somerset House as whispers circled around Violetta Bramley like vultures. She stood rigid beside the towering wedding cake, her fingers clutching the ivory handle of the ceremonial knife so tightly her knuckles had gone white. At 18, she had become the subject of society's most pitying murmurs. "Poor child," Lady Winterbourne whispered behind her fan, "sacrificed to a dying man for her family's debts." "The Duke of Somerset," another voice added with barely concealed relish. "They say his heart cannot sustain his weight much longer. A marriage bed that shall become a widow's mourning chamber by winter." Violetta's cheeks burned crimson, but her posture remained impeccable, as Lady Agatha had drilled into her since her parents' deaths. Her aunt approached now, dragging her niece by the elbow toward the cake table. "You shall smile," Lady Agatha hissed, her breath hot against Violetta's ear, "for you have secured a duchy when you deserved a convent. Your father's debts would have seen us in debtor's prison." The chamber orchestra paused as the major domo struck his staff upon the marble floor 3 times. "His Grace, the Duke of Somerset." Conversation fell silent. The sea of wedding guests parted, revealing a man of striking contradiction. Though broad-shouldered with a commanding presence, Alaric Crane moved with visible effort, his weight supported by an ornate cane of reinforced gold. His face, handsome even beneath the flush of exertion, appeared carved from determination rather than marble, with eyes sharp as cut glass that missed nothing. At 32, he moved with the careful precision of a man negotiating a truce with his own body. He approached Violetta with measured steps, each one punctuated by the creak of floorboards and the faint rasp of his breathing. The guests watched, breaths held, as he extended his free hand toward his bride of mere hours. "Your Grace," Violetta curtsied, lowering her gaze as decorum demanded. "My Duchess," he replied, his voice surprisingly rich and steady for a man so visibly burdened. "I believe this cake will not cut itself." Whispers erupted anew. Lady Pemberton's fan snapped shut. He cannot possibly stand for the ceremony, but the Duke had already positioned himself beside the table, setting his cane carefully against the silk-draped edge. He placed his hand over Violetta's on the knife handle, his palm warm and solid. "You need not fear, Your Grace," he murmured, his voice low enough for her alone. "I shall not collapse into our wedding cake and ruin the fondant." "I did not think you would, Your Grace," Violetta answered, her voice barely audible above the renewed rustle of silk and speculation. "Yet you tremble." "The room watches us with vulture's eyes," she confessed. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Let them feast on disappointment, then." Together they pressed down, the blade sliding through layers of almond cake and buttercream with unexpected grace. His hand remained steady, his weakness seemingly forgotten in this moment of shared purpose. When the first slice fell onto the porcelain plate, a smattering of applause rippled through the hall. Though whether from genuine pleasure or relief, Violetta could not say. The Duke lifted a small piece of cake on a silver fork, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Violetta understood what they expected. The traditional feeding between bride and groom, an intimate gesture that would provide fresh fodder for tomorrow's scandal sheets. She could already imagine the headlines: "The Beauty and the Beast, a wedding feast fit for mockery." But Alaric surprised her. Instead of raising the fork to her lips, he set it gently on the plate before her. "I think we have performed sufficiently for our audience," he said quietly, retrieving his cane. The movement was subtle, but Violetta noticed the way his jaw tightened, the slight tremor in his left hand as he gripped the gold handle. Lord Ashford, deep in his cups, raised his champagne glass with exaggerated enthusiasm. "A toast to the Duke and his blushing bride. May their union be—" He paused, his grin turning cruel, "as lengthy as it is prosperous." Laughter erupted from the corner where the younger lords had gathered, quickly stifled by their more diplomatic elders. Lady Agatha's face remained a mask of brittle satisfaction as she raised her own glass. Violetta felt the Duke's hand at the small of her back, gentle but firm. "Smile," he murmured, echoing her aunt's earlier command, but his tone held no cruelty. "Just a moment longer." She forced her lips into something resembling grace as servants began distributing slices of cake to the assembled guests. The orchestra resumed, a polonaise that sent couples swirling across the polished floor. Violetta watched the dancers, their movements fluid and effortless, and felt the weight of every eye that strayed from the spectacle to assess the Duke's labored stance beside her. "Your Grace appears fatigued," Lady Ashworth ventured, approaching with her daughter in tow. "Perhaps the Duchess might enjoy a turn about the room while you rest?" It was kindly meant, perhaps, but Violetta saw the calculation beneath the sympathy. They were already separating her from him in their minds, already imagining her as the young widow who would need consolation, guidance, perhaps even a second husband from among their eligible sons. "How thoughtful," Alaric replied, his voice carrying an edge of steel beneath the courtesy. "However, my Duchess and I have private matters to attend. We shall be taking our leave." A collective intake of breath swept through the nearest guests. It was barely past 9 o'clock. The wedding breakfast should continue for hours yet. To depart so early was to admit weakness, to confirm every whispered prediction about his failing health. Or, Violetta realized with a flash of understanding as she caught the knowing smirks on several faces, it suggested an eagerness for the wedding night that these gossips would find equally scandalous given the Duke's condition. Lady Agatha materialized at Violetta's elbow. "Surely you do not mean to abandon your own celebration, Your Grace?" The Duchess has barely greeted half the guests. "The Duchess," Alaric said, his gaze fixed on Violetta rather than her aunt, "has endured quite enough scrutiny for one evening, as have I." He extended his arm to Violetta. "My dear." Violetta placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the fine wool of his coat and the solid strength of the arm beneath, even as she felt him lean slightly, redistributing his weight. Together they moved toward the grand doors, the crowd parting before them like water before a ship's prow. Behind them, the whispers rose like steam. He cannot even last through his own wedding breakfast. The poor girl, imagine the horror of tonight. "I give him until Michaelmas, no longer." My beautiful family, before we dive into this interesting story, I need to share something important with you. We're on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers, and right now, there are only limited spots to be among our founding 1,000, our inner circle, who were here from the beginning, and I want you to be among our most cherished first 1,000. These first 1,000 subscribers will always hold a special place in this community. You'll be the ones who believed in these stories when we were just starting out, the ones who helped build something beautiful. But here's the thing. Once we hit that milestone, that opportunity closes forever. You'll still be welcome, but you won't be part of that exclusive founding group who shaped this channel's journey. So if you've been watching without subscribing, now is your moment. Don't let this story end without you being part of our family. And tell me where you are watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. Violetta's fingers tightened on Alaric's arm, and she felt him pat her hand once, a gesture so gentle and unexpected that tears pricked her eyes. The major domo opened the doors, and they passed into the cool darkness of the entrance hall. leaving the candlelight and cruel laughter behind. "Forgive me," Alaric said quietly as they approached the grand staircase. "I fear I have made you the subject of even more speculation." "You have made us both subjects of it, Your Grace," Violetta replied, surprised by her own boldness. "But I confess, I am grateful to be free of that room." He paused at the base of the stairs, and she saw what it cost him to maintain his composure, the slight sheen of perspiration on his brow, the careful control of his breathing. "There are 247 steps between this hall and my private chambers," he said. "I counted them this morning, preparing for this moment." "Then we shall count them together," Violetta heard herself say. For the first time since she had met him at the altar that morning, the Duke smiled, a real smile that reached his remarkable eyes and transformed his face entirely. "Together," he agreed. "Come, my unexpected Duchess. We have matters to discuss that require privacy and truth." The climb to the Duke's private chambers took nearly 20 minutes. Violetta had never considered stairs an act of endurance before. But watching Alaric navigate each step transformed her understanding entirely. He moved with methodical precision, his cane striking marble, his breath coming in carefully controlled measures. She kept her hand light on his arm, uncertain whether her touch provided support or merely the illusion of it for the benefit of the servants who lined the corridor at discreet intervals. "You need not maintain the pretense," Alaric said when they reached the first landing. "The staff are well aware of my limitations." "I am not pretending, Your Grace," Violetta replied, and realized with some surprise that it was true. She was not performing dutiful concern for an audience. She simply wished to reach the top of these endless stairs and escape the weight of eyes upon them both. When they finally arrived at the ducal apartments, a liveried footman opened the door to reveal a suite of rooms that took Violetta's breath away. She had expected grandeur. One did not marry a duke and anticipate modest accommodations, but the sheer scale overwhelmed her. The sitting room alone was larger than the entire floor of the narrow townhouse where she had lived with Lady Agatha these past 5 years. "Your chambers adjoin these through that door," Alaric said, gesturing with his cane toward an ornate entrance to the left. "I have taken the liberty of ensuring they are fully appointed. If anything displeases you, you need only inform Mrs. Halston, the housekeeper." The formality of his words struck Violetta as strange, given they were now man and wife. But before she could respond, he moved toward a high-backed chair near the fireplace and lowered himself into it with visible relief. His eyes closed briefly, and she saw the mask of ducal composure slip for just a moment. "Shall I ring for refreshment, Your Grace?" she asked, uncertain of her role in this peculiar tableau. "No." He opened his eyes, fixing her with that penetrating gaze. "Sit, please. We have little time before your aunt arrives, and there are things you must understand." "Lady Agatha? Here?" Violetta's stomach tightened. "But surely she will not be denied her final instructions to you," Alaric said with bitter amusement. "I have come to know your aunt's character quite thoroughly during our negotiations. She will arrive within the hour, citing some forgotten item of yours or a maternal duty to ensure your comfort. In truth, she will come to remind you of your place." Violetta sank onto the settee opposite him, her wedding gown pooling around her like sea foam. "You speak as though you expect her to be cruel." "I expect her to be precisely what she has always been. A woman who views you as a commodity that has finally yielded a return on her investment." He leaned forward slightly, his expression grave. "Tell me, did she explain the terms of our marriage settlement to you?" Heat crept up Violetta's neck. "She said that you had agreed to assume all of my father's debts in exchange for my hand. that your generosity had saved our family from ruin." Generosity. Alaric's laugh was hollow. Is that the word she used? He reached for a leather portfolio on the side table, moving with the care of a man conscious of every exertion. "Your aunt negotiated like a merchant at Smithfield Market. She understood precisely what she had to offer and what the market would bear." Violetta's hands twisted in her lap. "I do not understand, Your Grace." "You were sold, Violetta." His use of her Christian name startled her. Not metaphorically. Literally sold to the highest bidder willing to take on Lord Bramley's catastrophic debts. "Your aunt entertained 3 other offers before accepting mine." The word struck like a physical blow. Violetta had known, of course, that her marriage was a transaction. Such arrangements were common enough among the aristocracy. But to hear it stated so baldly, to learn there had been other bidders. "Who?" she whispered. "Lord Weatherby, who is 63 and buried 2 wives already. Sir Marcus Halloway, who has a taste for young girls and a reputation for violence. And Baron Ashcroft, whose estate is mortgaged to the hilt and who needed your father's London properties more than he needed a wife." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Your aunt would have accepted any of them. I simply offered the most favorable terms." Violetta felt the blood drain from her face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she will be here soon, and I want you to understand the nature of the woman who shaped you." He set the portfolio aside. "And because you deserve to know the truth of your situation before she poisons it further with her version." As if summoned by his words, a sharp knock sounded at the door. The footman entered, his expression apologetic. "Your Grace, Lady Agatha Bramley requests an audience with the Duchess. She insists it is a matter of some urgency." Alaric's eyes met Violetta's. "You may admit her, but remain within calling distance." Lady Agatha swept into the room with the confidence of a woman who had orchestrated this entire evening. She was dressed in dove-gray silk, her diamonds catching the firelight, her expression a careful composition of concern and satisfaction. "Your Grace," she curtsied to Alaric with perfunctory respect before turning to Violetta. "My dear child, I simply could not retire without ensuring your comfort on this most momentous night." "How thoughtful," Alaric said dryly, "though I believe my wife is quite comfortable." "Your wife?" Lady Agatha's smile sharpened. "Yes, indeed, which is precisely why I felt compelled to offer some final guidance." She moved closer to Violetta, her voice dropping to a tone of false intimacy. "Violetta, dear, you must understand your position. His Grace has been extraordinarily generous in resolving your father's debts. But this generosity comes with expectations." "I am aware of my duties, Aunt," Violetta said quietly. "Are you?" Lady Agatha's eyes glittered. "Then you understand that you are, in essence, a temporary wife. The Duke's physicians have been quite clear about his prognosis. He will not see Christmas." Violetta flinched, but Lady Agatha continued relentlessly. "You will comport yourself with dignity during these remaining months. You will not burden His Grace with emotional displays or demands upon his limited energy. You will be gracious, decorative, and above all, grateful." She placed a hand on Violetta's shoulder, her fingers digging in slightly. "And when the inevitable occurs, you will mourn appropriately, but not excessively. A young widow of means has prospects, but only if she maintains her reputation." "That is quite enough," Alaric's voice cut through the room like a blade. Lady Agatha turned to him with feigned surprise. Your Grace, I merely sought to prepare my niece for the realities of her situation. Surely you do not object to a guardian's final counsel? I object to you speaking of my death in my presence as though it were a foregone conclusion, Alaric said, his voice dangerously soft. And I particularly object to you instructing my Duchess on how to prepare for her widowhood on our wedding night. But Your Grace, the physicians, have been wrong before and shall likely be wrong again. He stood, the effort visible but his dignity intact. You have delivered your counsel, Lady Agatha. Now I must ask you to leave my wife and me in peace. The steel beneath the courtesy was unmistakable. Lady Agatha's expression flickered just for a moment, with something like fury, before smoothing back into practiced deference. Of course, Your Grace. I merely wished to ensure dear Violetta understood the temporary nature of her obligations. She kissed Violetta's cheek, her whisper ice against skin. Do not forget what you owe, child. Everything you have, this title, these rooms, the very gown on your back, exists because I secured it for you. You are a placeholder, nothing more. Play your role well, and you shall be a wealthy widow. Fail, and you shall find yourself with nothing. She swept from the room in a rustle of silk, leaving silence in her wake. Violetta sat frozen, her aunt's words echoing in her mind. Temporary. Placeholder. Nothing more. She had known, of course, that her marriage was arranged for financial reasons. But to hear her worth reduced to mere months, to be reminded that even her title was borrowed time. Violetta. Alaric's voice was gentle now, the edge gone. Look at me. She raised her eyes to find him watching her with unexpected compassion. Everything your aunt just said to you was designed to ensure your compliance and gratitude, to make certain you remain small and manageable. He moved slowly back to his chair, lowering himself carefully. But I did not marry you to acquire a decorative placeholder who counts the days until my death. Then why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why me, Your Grace? If you knew about the other offers, if you understood my aunt's nature, why agree to this arrangement at all? Alaric was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of emotion she had not expected. Because I made a promise to your mother, he said, and because you deserved better than to be sold to men who would destroy you. Even if all I can offer is a few months of protection, it is more than Weatherby or Halloway would have given you. Violetta's breath caught. You knew my mother? I did. His eyes met hers, and she saw something ancient and sorrowful in their depths. And that, my unexpected Duchess, is a conversation that requires considerably more time than we have tonight. He gestured toward the door to her chambers. You should rest. Tomorrow, we shall speak of truths your aunt would prefer remain buried. But for now, know this. You are not temporary. You are not a placeholder. You are the Duchess of Somerset, and that title carries more power than Lady Agatha's poison can diminish. If you're already angry at Lady Agatha and want to see her get what she deserves, you need to subscribe right now, because trust me, her downfall is spectacular, and you'll be furious with yourself if the algorithm doesn't show you that part. Also, go ahead and like this video so other people trapped in toxic family situations can find this story. They need to see what standing up to manipulative relatives looks like. Don't let this story disappear into the algorithm where nobody can find it. Violetta woke to unfamiliar luxury. Sheets of Egyptian cotton, a canopy of midnight blue velvet, and sunlight streaming through windows so tall they seemed designed for giants. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned with the weight of her wedding ring, heavy and foreign on her finger. A maid she did not recognize was laying out garments in shades of pearl and rose. "Good morning, Your Grace. I am Mary, assigned to your personal service. His Grace requests your presence at breakfast in 1 hour, if it pleases you." If it pleases you, as though she had any choice in the matter. But when Mary helped her into a morning dress of pale blue muslin and led her through the labyrinth of corridors to a sunny breakfast room, Violetta found it empty save for an elaborate spread of food and a note in firm, masculine script. "Forgive my absence. I require additional time this morning. Join me in the portrait gallery at 10 o'clock. A." Violetta ate alone, conscious of servants moving silently at the periphery, and wondered what additional time meant for a man whose own body had become his prison. She found out at precisely 10 o'clock when she entered the portrait gallery, a vast hall lined with crane ancestors in gilded frames, and discovered Alaric standing before a full-length mirror, fully dressed in mourning clothes, his face a mask of concentrated frustration. "Your Grace?" she ventured. He turned, and she saw what the effort cost him. His color was high, his breathing labored, and a faint sheen of perspiration marked his brow despite the cool morning air. "Ah, punctual, a quality I appreciate." He gestured toward the mirror with his cane. "Tell me, Duchess, what do you see?" Violetta hesitated, uncertain what answer he sought. "I see a gentleman preparing for the day, Your Grace. Diplomatic." His smile was bitter. "Look again. Tell me what society sees." She forced herself to look, truly look, at the man before her. Alaric Crane stood well over 6 feet, his frame broad across the shoulders, but his body carried weight that seemed to drag at him like an anchor. His waistcoat, expertly tailored, could not quite disguise the swell of his abdomen. His face, handsome in its bone structure, was rounded by flesh that blurred the sharp edges of what had once been an aristocratic profile. His legs, strong enough to support him, nonetheless seemed strained by the burden they bore. "They see a man who has lost control," Alaric said when she remained silent. "A glutton, a hedonist who has eaten and drunk himself into this condition and now reaps the consequences of his own excess." "I do not presume to know what society sees," Violetta said carefully. "Do not dissemble. You heard them last night. You have heard the whispers since our engagement was announced." He moved toward the windows, each step deliberate. "The fat Duke, the corpulent Crane, Lord Lard. They think themselves clever with their mockery." Violetta watched him navigate the gallery, and understanding began to dawn. This was not vanity or self-pity. This was preparation. "We are expected at Lady Pemberton's ball tonight," Alaric continued. "Our first public appearance as man and wife. The vultures will be circling, eager to see if I can manage a few hours in society or if I shall collapse in spectacular fashion, confirming all their predictions." He paused before a portrait of a lean, athletic man in riding clothes. "My father. At 32, my age precisely. They say I am a disappointment to his memory. Your Grace, you need not attend if I am too weak? Too grotesque?" His voice sharpened. "That is precisely why I must attend. Lady Agatha has already begun spreading her poison, suggesting that I am mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. If I hide away, if I show weakness, she will use it as evidence to petition for my estates to be placed in trust. And do you know who she has suggested as trustee?" Violetta felt cold. "Herself?" "Her and her solicitor, Mr. Blackwood, a man whose ethics are as flexible as his fees are exorbitant." Alaric turned from the portrait. "So tonight, I will dress in my finest. I will enter that ballroom on my own 2 feet. I will dance with my Duchess, and I will show them all that I am master of Somerset still. But at what cost? The words escaped before Violetta could stop them. Alaric's expression softened slightly. You ask the question no one else dares. What does it cost me to perform this charade? He moved to a chair and sat with careful control. This morning, I woke at 5. It took me 20 minutes to rise from my bed. My joints stiffen overnight, you see, and the weight. The weight makes every movement a negotiation. My valet, Patterson, has been with me 15 years. He knows not to offer help unless asked, though I see the concern in his eyes. He gestured at his attire. These clothes took 40 minutes to put on. The boots alone required a special hook device because I can no longer bend to reach my own feet. By the time I was dressed, I had already exhausted myself, and the day had barely begun. Violetta sank onto a nearby settee, transfixed by his brutal honesty. Walking across a room, something you do without thought, requires me to calculate each step. How far is it? Are there stairs? Will there be a chair where I can rest without appearing weak? Is the floor polished marble that might prove treacherous, or carpet that will cushion any instability? He met her eyes. Last night, I climbed those stairs to my chambers because I had to. Because servants were watching, because you were watching, because a duke does not fail on his wedding night. But when I finally reached my rooms, I sat in that chair for 2 hours before I could summon the strength to undress. 2 hours, Violetta whispered. My heart races with the slightest exertion. My lungs burn. My joints ache under the burden of flesh I cannot seem to shed, no matter how little I eat. His voice dropped. The physicians blame me, of course. They say I lack discipline, that I indulge too freely in rich foods and wine. But I have tried their starvation diets. I have eaten nothing but broth and vegetables for weeks at a time. And still, my body betrays me. He leaned forward, his expression intense. Do you know what happens when I persist with their regimens? I grow weaker. The weight remains, but my strength fades. I become dizzy, confused. My heart beats irregularly, skipping and racing. So I eat again, just enough to function, and they cluck their tongues and call me weak-willed. Violetta felt something shift in her understanding. This was not the simple morality tale society had told her, the glutton reaping his just rewards. This was something else entirely, something the physicians did not understand and therefore could not treat. Tonight's ball, she said slowly. How long will it last? 4 hours, typically. We need not stay the entire time, but we must remain long enough to be seen, long enough to dance. His jaw tightened. The ballroom at Pemberton House has 32 steps from the entrance to the main floor. I counted them last season. There are 2 landings where I can pause briefly without it appearing I am resting. If I time my breathing correctly, maintain conversation to mask any difficulty, I can make it appear effortless. Appear, Violetta echoed. Appearance is everything in our world, Duchess. Surely your aunt taught you that. He stood again, demonstrating the effort it required. The slight bracing of his arms on the chair, the careful shift of weight, the momentary pause before his first step. Tonight, I will enter that ballroom with you on my arm. I will greet Lady Pemberton with perfect courtesy. I will ignore the whispers and the stares. And when the music begins, I will dance with you. Your Grace, if it causes you such pain I can endure, Alaric cut her off. It is pity I cannot stomach. It is the assumption of my incompetence I will not tolerate. He crossed to her, moving with that careful deliberation she was beginning to recognize. They expect me to hide, to skulk in my estate like a beast too monstrous for society. Every appearance I make, every public function I attend, is an act of defiance. He extended his hand to her. So tonight, you will wear your finest gown. You will smile at my side. And together, we will show them that the Duke and Duchess of Somerset are not so easily dismissed. Violetta took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm, the strength still present despite everything he had described. And after? When we return home and there are no more eyes to perform for? For the first time, something like vulnerability crossed his features. After, I shall likely spend an hour in my chair, unable to move. Patterson will bring cold compresses for the swelling in my ankles. I will take the laudanum my physician prescribed for the pain, though I hate how it clouds my mind. And I will sleep poorly, my heart racing, my body aching, knowing I must rise the next morning and do it all again. There must be another way, Violetta said. Some treatment, some physician who understands. I have seen 17 physicians, Alaric said wearily. From London's finest to a charlatan in Brighton who promised miracle cures. They all say the same thing. Eat less, exercise more, apply discipline. As though I have not tried. As though this body were simply a matter of willpower. He released her hand. No, Duchess. There is no cure for what I am. There is only endurance. And the determination not to let them see me break. The clock in the hall chimed 11. Alaric glanced toward the sound. I must rest now if I am to have strength for tonight. Patterson will call for you at 8. Wear something that will make them forget to look at me. He moved toward the door with that same measured care, and Violetta watched him go, understanding for the first time the true nature of the man she had married. Not a glutton, not a hedonist, but a warrior fighting a battle no one else could see, against an enemy even he did not fully understand. The clock struck midnight as Violetta sat in her chambers, still fully dressed in the sapphire gown Mary had laid out for dinner. A dinner that had never occurred. Instead, a footman had brought a tray to her room with a note. Please join me in the library at midnight. We have matters to discuss that cannot wait. A. Now she stood before the library door, her hand raised to knock, wondering what new revelation awaited her. The past 2 days had shattered every assumption she had held about her marriage, about the Duke, about her own future. What more could there possibly be? Enter, came Alaric's voice before she could knock. The library was a cathedral of books, shelves rising 2 stories high, accessible by a wrought iron gallery that circled the room. A fire burned in the massive hearth, casting dancing shadows across leather spines and gilded titles. Alaric sat in a high-backed chair near the fire, still in his evening clothes, his cane propped against the armrest. On the table beside him sat a decanter of brandy, 2 glasses, and a leather-bound journal that looked old enough to be an heirloom. You came, he said, and she heard relief in his voice. You requested my presence, Your Grace. I could hardly refuse. You could have. He gestured to the chair opposite his. You are a duchess now, Violetta. You have more power to refuse than you realize. But I am grateful you chose not to exercise it tonight. She settled into the chair, acutely aware that they were alone in a way they had not been since the wedding. No servants hovering at the periphery, no aunt dispensing poison. Just the 2 of them and whatever truth he had summoned her here to hear. You said you made a promise to my mother, Violetta began, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. But my mother died when I was 13. I do not recall her ever mentioning you. She would not have. Our acquaintance was delicate. Alaric poured brandy into both glasses, his movements careful and deliberate. Your mother, Catherine, was lady-in-waiting to my mother, the Dowager Duchess, before your parents married. They were very close. When my mother fell ill, this was 20 years ago now, your mother nursed her through her final months. He offered Violetta a glass, which she accepted, though she had rarely tasted spirits. My mother, in her final days, made your mother promise to watch over me. She knew, you see, what was beginning to happen to my body. The physicians could not explain it then any better than they can now, but she recognized that I would face challenges beyond the typical burdens of nobility. Your mother knew about your condition? She was the only one who did not blame me for it. Alaric's voice softened. She told your mother that I would need protection, not from physical threats, but from those who would exploit my vulnerability. And your mother, being loyal and kind, promised to fulfill that duty. Violetta sipped the brandy, feeling it burn down her throat. But my mother died years ago. How does this explain your promise to her? Because she kept watching over me, even from a distance, even after she married your father and moved to their estate in Hampshire. Alaric reached for the leather journal. She wrote to me. Not frequently, it would have been improper, but when she noticed things, troubling things. He opened the journal, and Violetta saw her mother's handwriting, achingly familiar even after 5 years. The sight of it made her throat tighten. 3 months before she died, your mother wrote to me about your aunt. Alaric turned the journal so Violetta could see the page. She had discovered that Lady Agatha was in negotiations with certain gentlemen about your future. You were only 12 years old, but already your aunt was planning your sale. Violetta's hands trembled as she took the journal, reading her mother's elegant script. My dear Alaric, I fear for my daughter. Agatha has been corresponding with Lord Weatherby about a future arrangement. The man is a predator, and my girl is still a child. I have tried to intervene, but I am not well. The physicians say it is consumption. I do not think I have much time. Please, if something should happen to me, do not let Violetta fall into Agatha's schemes. You understand what it means to be seen as a commodity. Do not let my daughter suffer the same fate. See. The words blurred as tears filled Violetta's eyes. She knew. She knew what Aunt Agatha would do. She knew exactly what kind of woman your aunt was, and she begged me to protect you if she could not. Alaric's voice was gentle. I promised her I would. But I was younger then, my condition less severe. I thought I had time. I thought I could monitor the situation from a distance and intervene if necessary. But you did not, Violetta whispered. No. I failed. The words were heavy with regret. After your mother died, I lost track of you. Your father, in his grief, moved the family to London. Then he died 2 years later, and you vanished into your aunt's household. By the time I located you again, Lady Agatha had already begun entertaining offers for your hand. He leaned forward, his expression intense. When I learned she was negotiating with Weatherby, with Halloway, with men who would have destroyed you, I knew I had to act. I could not break my promise to your mother again. So you offered for me yourself. Understanding crystallized. Not because you needed a wife, but because you needed to save me from them. Precisely. Alaric sat back. I knew your aunt would accept my offer. My title is higher, my fortune greater, and she assumed I would die quickly, leaving you a wealthy widow. It was, from her perspective, an ideal arrangement. But from yours? From mine, it was the fulfillment of a debt I owed to the woman who showed me kindness when everyone else showed only pity or disdain. He met her eyes. I married you to protect you, Violetta. Nothing more. I have no expectations of you beyond what you are willing to give. I do not expect you to love me or even to pretend affection. I simply could not stand by and let you be sold to monsters when I had the power to prevent it. Violetta set down her glass with trembling hands. So this marriage? It is purely a transaction of protection? I call it a protective covenant, Alaric said. You receive my name, my title, and the security of my fortune. In exchange, I ask only that you allow me to fulfill the promise I made to your mother. When I die, and the physicians assure me it will be soon, you will inherit everything. You will be a duchess with independent wealth. Your aunt will have no power over you. You can choose your own path. And if you do not die? The question escaped before she could stop it. Alaric's expression was unreadable. Then we shall navigate that circumstance together, I suppose. But let us not indulge in false hope, Duchess. My body is failing. It is only a matter of time. Violetta stood abruptly, moving to the fire, her mind whirling. Everything she had believed about her marriage, that it was a simple exchange of debts for title, had been revealed as something far more complex. Her mother had known, had tried to protect her from beyond the grave. And this man, this duke whom society mocked and pitied, had honored a promise made to a dying woman at great personal cost. Why tell me this now? She asked, staring into the flames. Why not let me believe the simpler version? Because your aunt will use the simpler version against you, Alaric said. She will remind you constantly that you are merely a temporary inconvenience, a placeholder warming a chair until I die. And she can claim influence over your widowhood. I wanted you to know the truth before her poison takes root. You are not here because you were sold. You are here because you were saved. Violetta turned to face him. And what if I do not wish to be saved? What if I would rather have had the choice myself? Then I have committed a great wrong, and I apologize. His voice was steady. But given the alternative was Lord Weatherby or Sir Marcus Halloway, I confess I do not regret my presumption. Your mother trusted me to make this choice when she could not. I honored that trust. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Violetta studied the man before her, this duke who had married her, not for love or even companionship, but out of loyalty to a dead woman and a promise made years ago. It should have made her angry. It should have felt like another form of control, another way men decided her fate without her consent. But instead, she felt something unexpected, gratitude. And beneath that, the first stirring of something that might become respect. My mother chose well when she chose you as her ally, Violetta said finally. She always had excellent judgment of character. Alaric's shoulders seemed to relax slightly. She was an extraordinary woman. You have her eyes. Did you know that? The same intelligence, the same determination beneath the surface propriety. I have very little of her, I fear. Aunt Agatha made certain to train any independence out of me. Your aunt trained you to appear compliant, Alaric corrected. But appearance and reality are not the same thing. You proved that tonight by coming here, knowing I might reveal uncomfortable truths. A truly compliant woman would have stayed in her chambers. Violetta returned to her chair, settling into it with a new understanding of her position. So what happens now? Do we simply coexist? Perform for society and live separate lives behind closed doors? That is entirely your choice. Alaric reached for the decanter again, refilling his glass. I ask nothing of you except your presence at necessary social functions and your discretion regarding my condition. Beyond that, you are free to live as you choose. Read in this library whenever you wish. Ride in the park. Decorate these rooms to your taste. The estate is yours to command, as much as it is mine. And when you die? She forced herself to say it plainly. What then? Then you will be the Duchess of Somerset in your own right, with a fortune substantial enough to ensure you never answer to anyone again. Not your aunt, not society, not any future husband, unless you choose one. He met her eyes. That is the future your mother wanted for you. Freedom, security, choice. I am simply the instrument through which she achieves it from beyond the grave. Violetta felt tears threaten again, but refused to let them fall. She would have been pleased to know you kept your promise. I hope so. Alaric's voice was rough. It is perhaps the only truly honorable thing I have done in a life otherwise marked by the humiliation of physical decline. That is not true, Violetta said with sudden fierceness. You have endured mockery with dignity. You have refused to hide despite the cost. And you have saved me from a fate I did not even know threatened me. Those are not small things, Your Grace. For a long moment, Alaric simply looked at her, something shifting in his expression. Perhaps, he said finally, this protective covenant of ours may prove more beneficial than I anticipated. For both of us. The clock struck 1. Alaric stood with visible effort. You should rest. Tomorrow brings new challenges, and you will need your strength. But as Violetta rose to leave, she paused. Your Grace, thank you for honoring your promise to my mother, for giving me a future I could not have secured myself. Thank your mother, Alaric said softly. She is the one who saw what you needed and trusted me to provide it. I am merely keeping a vow. As Violetta left the library, she carried her mother's journal clutched to her chest, a tangible connection to the woman who had loved her enough to plan for her safety, even in death. And behind her, the Duke of Somerset settled back into his chair, the weight of his protective covenant fulfilled at last. 3 days after the library revelation, Violetta found herself alone in the vast expanse of Somerset House with nothing but time and questions. Alaric had retreated to his study with his steward to review estate matters, a process he had warned her might take the entire day. Mary had laid out embroidery in the morning room. But Violetta's restless mind refused to focus on needlework. Instead, she found herself wandering the portrait gallery, studying the faces of Crane ancestors. She paused before the painting of Alaric's father, that lean, athletic man who seemed to mock his son from beyond the grave. Then she moved to a smaller portrait beside it. A young man in military dress, barely 20, with Alaric's sharp eyes but a frame as trim and powerful as any soldier's. That was painted the year I returned from the peninsula. Alaric's voice came from behind her. Violetta startled, turning to find him leaning heavily on his cane in the doorway. His color was poor, his breathing labored even from the short walk from his study. I did not mean to intrude upon your business, Your Grace. The steward had to leave unexpectedly. His daughter has taken ill. Alaric moved slowly into the gallery. I find I am grateful for the interruption. Estate finances are tedious at the best of times. He came to stand beside her, gazing up at his younger self. I was 21 there, I had just received a commendation for bravery at Vittoria. Wellington himself mentioned me in dispatches. His voice held no pride, only a kind of bewildered sorrow. I could ride for 12 hours without tiring. I could march with a full pack in the Spanish heat. I could... He stopped, his jaw tightening. What happened? Violetta asked softly. I wish I knew. He turned from the portrait as though the sight of it pained him. It began so gradually I barely noticed. A tightness in my uniform. Fatigue that took longer to shake after exertion. I thought it was simply the stress of war, the irregular meals, the constant vigilance. But when I returned to England 2 years later, I knew something was wrong. He gestured toward a settee, and they both sat. Violetta conscious of how carefully he lowered himself, how he positioned his cane within easy reach. The weight came on so quickly, Violetta. Within 6 months of my return, I had gained 3 stone. Within a year, 5. The physicians were baffled. They put me on restrictive diets, water and vegetables, nothing else. I followed their regimens religiously, measuring every portion, denying myself even bread. And still, my body expanded as though mocking my efforts. Surely the physicians could see that their treatments were not working? Oh, they saw. But rather than question their understanding, they questioned my honesty. Bitterness crept into his voice. They accused me of secret eating, of sneaking food in the night like a guilty child. They suggested I lacked moral fiber, that I was weak-willed, gluttonous. One particularly sanctimonious doctor suggested my condition was God's punishment for some unnamed sin. Violetta felt anger rise in her chest. That is unconscionable. It is the natural conclusion when one does not understand the mechanism at work. Alaric shifted in his seat, seeking comfort his body would not grant. If a man grows fat, he must be eating too much. If diet does not remedy the problem, he must be cheating. The logic is simple, straightforward, and entirely wrong in my case. How do you know it is wrong? Because I have kept meticulous records. He met her eyes. I am many things, Duchess, but I am not a fool. When the physicians blamed me for my condition, I determined to prove or disprove their theories with evidence. For the past 8 years, I have documented everything, every meal, every symptom, every treatment attempted. I have created a ledger of my own body's betrayal. Violetta leaned forward. May I see it? Alaric studied her for a long moment. Why? So you can judge for yourself whether I am the glutton they claim? No, she said firmly. So I can understand what you are fighting against. You have told me your condition is not simple excess, but you have not shown me the evidence. I want to see it. I want to understand. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or cautious hope. Very well. Come. He led her through the corridors to his private study, a room she had not yet entered. It was smaller than she expected, lined with books on medicine and natural philosophy. A large desk dominated the space, covered with papers and correspondence. But Alaric moved past all of this to a locked cabinet in the corner. From his waistcoat pocket, he produced a small key and opened the cabinet to reveal a row of identical leather-bound journals, each spine marked with a year. He pulled out the most recent volume and handed it to Violetta. Read, he said simply. She opened the journal to a random page dated 3 months prior, 6th of March, 1823. Woke at 5 a.m., heart racing without cause. Pulse irregular, approximately 95 beats per minute while still abed. Rose with difficulty, joints swollen, particularly ankles and knees. Weight upon waking, 22 stone 4 pounds. No change from previous week despite continued restricted diet. Breakfast, plain porridge with water, no sugar. 1 cup of tea, no milk. Estimated 200 calories. Morning, attempted to walk to the village. Made it only as far as the east gate before exhaustion forced return. Distance, approximately 1/4 mile. Required 1 hour of rest afterward. Heart rate remained elevated for 2 hours following exertion. Midday meal, boiled chicken breast, steamed vegetables, carrots, greens, water. Estimated 300 calories. Afternoon, profound fatigue. Slept for 3 hours, unplanned. Woke disoriented and shaking. Patterson reports I appeared feverish, though no fever was present. Evening meal, vegetable broth, 1 slice of plain bread. Estimated 250 calories. Total daily intake, approximately 750 calories. Night, woke multiple times with heart palpitations, dreams of drowning. Profound thirst despite drinking water throughout the day. Ankles so swollen I could not remove my own stockings. Notes. This is the 3rd week of Dr. Morrison's prescribed regimen. I have lost no weight. I have, in fact, gained 1/2 stone despite consuming less than 1/3 of what a laboring man might eat. The weakness is becoming profound. I fear if I continue much longer, I will lack the strength to rise from bed at all. Violetta looked up, horrified. 750 calories? That is a starvation diet. Yes, and it accomplished nothing except to make me weaker. Alaric pulled out another journal, this one from 5 years earlier, and opened it to a marked page. Here, this was Dr. Thornton's approach. He believed I was retaining fluid due to excessive salt consumption. The entry detailed a week during which Alaric had consumed nothing but unsalted foods and herb tea, intended to promote evacuation of excess humors. The weight had indeed dropped, 4 pounds in 1 week. But the subsequent entries showed it returning within days, along with dizziness, confusion, and a racing heart. I have tried everything, Alaric said, pulling out journal after journal. Bloodletting, purges, emetics, calomel, digitalis, starvation, excessive exercise until I collapsed, every fashionable treatment and a dozen experimental ones. And through it all, I have documented the results with scientific precision. Violetta flipped through the pages, seeing years of meticulous records. Meals measured to the ounce, symptoms described in careful detail, observations about patterns, how certain foods seem to cause more swelling than others, how stress exacerbated the heart palpitations, how sleep quality affected the next day's fatigue. This is extraordinary, she breathed. This is the work of a natural philosopher, not a... She trailed off. Not a glutton, Alaric finished. No. It is the work of a desperate man trying to solve a puzzle to which no one else seems to have the answer. She found an entry from 2 years prior that made her breath catch. I have now tried 17 different physicians' regimens. Not one has produced lasting improvement. Several have made me markedly worse. I am forced to conclude that the fundamental understanding of my condition is flawed. The physicians believe I am fat because I eat too much. But what if the causation runs the opposite direction? What if my body hoards every calorie, every drop of fluid, due to some internal derangement, and the hunger, the thirst, the fatigue are results of this process, not causes? If that is true, then all their treatments are addressing the wrong problem. They are punishing me for symptoms I cannot control, while the true disease continues unchecked. This, Violetta said, pointing to the passage. This is the truth, is it not? You are not betrayed by lack of discipline. You are betrayed by your own blood. Alaric sank into his desk chair, looking suddenly exhausted. I believe so, yes. But belief without proof is merely theory, and I lack the medical knowledge to understand what internal mechanism might cause such a thing. Violetta turned more pages, seeing the progressive worsening documented in careful script. The weight that climbed despite dietary restrictions. The heart symptoms that grew more frequent and severe. The swelling in his extremities that came and went without pattern. The profound fatigue that could strike without warning. Have you shown these to your physicians? The early ones, yes. They dismissed my record-keeping as obsessive, evidence of a disordered mind. One suggested my fixation on my symptoms was making them worse, that I should simply accept my condition as God's will and cease my morbid documentation. So you stopped sharing. What was the point? They had already decided the answer. I was a glutton who lacked moral fiber. Any evidence to the contrary was merely my attempt to excuse my weakness. He gestured at the journals. So I continued my records in private. At least here, in these pages, the truth is preserved, even if no one believes it. Violetta closed the journal she held and looked at the man before her with new eyes. She had thought she understood his situation after their conversation in the library. But this was different. This was not simply a man suffering from an unnamed condition. This was a man conducting a lone scientific investigation into his own body, fighting against both his disease and the medical establishment's refusal to see beyond their preconceptions. There must be someone, she said. Some physician, somewhere, who would look at this evidence with fresh eyes. Someone who would see what you see. If such a person exists, I have not found them in 8 years of searching. Alaric's voice was heavy with resignation. I have corresponded with doctors in Edinburgh, Vienna, even as far as Boston. Most do not bother to reply. Those who do offer the same tired advice. Eat less, exercise more, apply discipline. Then we shall look harder. The words came out with more force than Violetta intended. You have documented your condition with scientific rigor. This is valuable data, Your Grace. Somewhere there must be a physician with the wit to recognize it as such. Alaric looked at her with an expression somewhere between hope and despair. You speak as though this is now your crusade as well as mine. You married me to fulfill a protective covenant, Violetta said, meeting his eyes. Perhaps it is time I offered protection in return. Not from predatory suitors, but from a medical profession too arrogant to admit the limits of their understanding. For the first time since she had met him, Alaric smiled. Not the bitter ghost of amusement she had seen before, but something genuine and surprised. You continue to astonish me, Duchess. Good, Violetta said, already formulating plans. Because I intend to do so with increasing frequency. Now show me everything. Every journal, every failed treatment, every observation. If there is an answer hidden in this data, we shall find it together. Violetta spent the next week immersed in Alaric's journals, reading late into the night by candlelight until her eyes burned and her head ached with medical terminology she barely understood. Mary brought her meals that went cold and untouched. The household staff whispered that the new Duchess had gone peculiar, locked away in His Grace's study like a scholar rather than a proper lady. Let them whisper. Violetta had found something in those meticulous pages, a pattern the physicians had missed because they had been looking at symptoms rather than systems. She noticed that Alaric's heart palpitations worsened after periods of severe caloric restriction, that his fluid retention increased when he was under stress, regardless of salt intake, that his profound fatigue episodes often followed nights of poor sleep, creating a vicious cycle. Most tellingly, she observed that his weight remained stubbornly fixed, even during periods when his documented intake would have starved a laboring man to skeletal thinness. This was not gluttony. This was something fundamental gone wrong inside his body, some internal clockwork that had broken and now drove him toward decline no matter what he did. On the 8th day, she found Alaric in the morning room, struggling through correspondence with his steward. His color was poor, his breathing labored even at rest. "You have been neglecting your own health while studying mine," he observed without looking up. "Mrs. Halston reports you have eaten almost nothing this week." "I have been occupied. Obsessed, more like." He set down his pen. "Violetta, I appreciate your concern, but you cannot solve in 8 days what 17 physicians have failed to address in 8 years." "Perhaps not," she agreed, settling into the chair across from him. "But I can do what those 17 physicians refuse to do. I can look beyond conventional wisdom. Tell me, Your Grace, have any of your doctors studied in the East, in India or China, where medical philosophy differs from our European traditions?" Alaric's brow furrowed. "No. Why would that matter?" "Because I have been reading." She produced a slim volume from the library, its pages marked with paper scraps. "This is an account by a British surgeon who served with the East India Company. He describes cases of what he calls glandular disorders, conditions where internal organs produce too much or too little of certain vital humors, causing symptoms that appear inexplicable by conventional diagnosis." "Vital humors?" Alaric's tone was skeptical. "That is ancient theory, Violetta. Modern medicine has moved beyond such concepts." "Has it? Or has it simply replaced one set of assumptions with another?" She opened the book to a marked passage. "This surgeon describes a case remarkably similar to yours. A military officer who gained excessive weight despite restricted diet, suffered from heart irregularities, profound fatigue, and fluid retention. The Indian physicians he consulted believed the man's thyroid gland was producing insufficient quantities of what they called metabolic essence." "And did their treatment work?" The account ends before resolution, but the surgeon notes he witnessed partial improvement when the patient was given extracts from animal thyroid glands. She closed the book. "The point is not whether this specific treatment would help you, but that these physicians approached the problem differently. They looked at internal glandular function rather than external moral failing." Alaric leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Even if such an approach has merit, where would we find a physician trained in these Eastern methods? I cannot exactly travel to Calcutta in my condition." "No. But there is a physician in London who studied in India for 15 years before returning to England." Violetta pulled a newspaper clipping from her reticule. "Dr. Nathaniel Ashworth. He has published several papers on metabolic disorders and glandular function in The Lancet. The medical establishment considers him something of a radical, which is precisely why his theories are likely nonsense. Or precisely why he might see what others have missed." Violetta leaned forward. "Your Grace, you have tried conventional medicine. 17 physicians' worth of conventional medicine. It has failed you utterly. What do you have to lose by consulting one radical who might actually understand the mechanisms at work?" "My dignity?" Alaric's smile was bitter. "Can you imagine the gossip if it becomes known that the Duke of Somerset has resorted to some charlatan peddling Eastern mysticism? I can imagine the gossip if you die before Christmas, leaving your title and fortune to be fought over by Lady Agatha and her vulture friends." Violetta's voice was sharp. "Which concern weighs more heavily, Your Grace? Your dignity or your life?" The words hung in the air between them. Alaric's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. You have become rather fierce, Duchess. I have become rather invested in keeping my husband alive long enough to determine if there is any hope. She softened her tone. Please, Alaric, let me write to this Dr. Ashworth. If he proves to be a fraud, we have lost nothing. But if he has even a fraction of the insight his papers suggest, he might offer what no other physician has, actual understanding. Alaric was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Finally, he sighed. Very well. Write to your radical physician. But I want to see his credentials before he sets foot in this house. And if he proposes bloodletting or purges, he will be ejected immediately. Violetta stood, clutching the book to her chest. I shall write today. Violetta. His voice stopped her at the door. Why are you doing this? The protective covenant I offered requires nothing beyond your presence at social functions. You need not involve yourself in my medical affairs. She turned to face him. This man who had married her to honor a promise to a dead woman, who had saved her from predators while his own body waged war against him, who documented his decline with scientific precision because no one else would believe his truth. Because you kept a promise to my mother when you did not have to, she said simply. And because I find I cannot stand by and watch you fade away when there might be answers yet to find. 3 days later, a reply arrived from Dr. Nathaniel Ashworth. Violetta took it directly to Alaric's study, where she found him reviewing estate accounts with visible effort. He will come, she announced, breaking the seal. He says he has read about your case in medical circles. Apparently, the Duke of Somerset's mysterious weight gain has been a subject of speculation among physicians. He believes he may be able to help. Alaric set down his pen. Did he propose a treatment? No. He says he must examine you first and review your documentation. He specifically requests to see any records you have kept of symptoms and dietary intake. Violetta looked up from the letter. He believes personal documentation is more reliable than physicians' reports, because patients notice subtleties that doctors miss during brief examinations. He wants to see my journals? Alaric's expression was guarded. You told him about them? I mentioned you had kept meticulous records. I thought it would demonstrate you are a serious and observant patient, not a glutton in denial. Or it will confirm his colleague's opinion that I am obsessive and disordered. He is not his colleague's, Violetta said firmly. That is the entire point. When can he come? Alaric pulled the letter from her hands, reading it himself. His expression shifted as he read, something like cautious hope flickering across his features. He proposes to visit next Tuesday. He says he will need several hours for a thorough examination and review of my records. He looked up. He also says he makes no promises of cure, only of honest investigation. That the human body is complex and not all conditions can be remedied, but all deserve to be understood. That is more honesty than any of your other physicians have offered. It is. Alaric folded the letter carefully. Very well. Tell Dr. Ashworth he may come on Tuesday, but I want you present during the examination. Violetta blinked in surprise. Your Grace, that would hardly be proper. Propriety be damned. You have read my journals. You understand my case as well as any physician at this point. And I find... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I find I trust your judgment, Violetta. If this Dr. Ashworth is a fraud, you will see it as quickly as I will. And if he has genuine insight, you will recognize that as well. Then I shall be there, Violetta promised. The following Tuesday arrived with unseasonable rain, the sky dark as slate as a hired carriage pulled up to Somerset House. Violetta watched from the morning room window as a man emerged, tall and lean, perhaps 50 years of age, with graying hair and the weathered complexion of someone who had spent years in tropical climates. He carried a worn leather medical bag and moved with the efficient purpose of a military surgeon. Patterson showed him to Alaric's study, where both Duke and Duchess waited. Dr. Ashworth entered with a brisk bow, his sharp eyes taking in everything. The reinforced chair Alaric sat in, the cane propped nearby, the stack of journals on the desk, the pallor of the Duke's complexion. "Your Grace, Your Grace." He nodded to each of them. "Thank you for receiving me. I understand you have been suffering from a metabolic condition that has baffled conventional physicians." "That is a diplomatic way to phrase it," Alaric said dryly. "Most of them believe I am simply a glutton with weak moral fiber." "Yes, I have heard their opinions. I find them tedious and unscientific." Dr. Ashworth set down his bag. "If you will permit me, I would like to begin with your own account of your symptoms, in your own words, without the filter of medical jargon. Then I will examine you physically. Finally, I will review these records Her Grace mentioned." For the next 3 hours, Dr. Ashworth conducted the most thorough examination Alaric had ever experienced. He listened to Alaric's heart for a full 10 minutes, timing the beats and noting irregularities. He examined Alaric's eyes, his tongue, his skin. He palpated his throat, pressing gently around the thyroid gland until Alaric winced. "Enlarged," Dr. Ashworth murmured. "Significantly so. Did any of your previous physicians note this?" "They mentioned I had a thick neck. They attributed it to excess fat." "Fools." The word was said without heat, merely as clinical observation. Dr. Ashworth moved to the journals, reading selected passages with increasing interest. Finally, he looked up. "Your Grace," he said quietly, "I believe you are suffering from what I have come to call thyroid insufficiency. Your thyroid gland, which should produce hormones that regulate your body's use of energy, is failing in its function. This causes your metabolism to slow dramatically, leading to weight gain despite restricted intake, fluid retention, fatigue, and heart irregularities." Violetta felt her breath catch. "Can it be treated?" "Possibly. In India, I observed cases where patients improved when given extracts from animal thyroid glands. The results were not miraculous, but they were measurable." He looked at Alaric. "It would be experimental. There are risks. But based on your documentation, Your Grace, you are already dying slowly under conventional treatment. What I offer is the possibility of something different." Alaric's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "When can we begin?" Dr. Ashworth's treatment plan arrived by special courier 2 days after his initial examination, written in precise medical script across 12 pages of detailed instructions. Violetta read it in the morning room while Alaric slept late, exhausted from the examination's demands. The document covered everything from the thyroid extract dosing schedule to lifestyle modifications. But one section made her pause: dietary recommendations that contradicted everything the previous physicians had prescribed. "He wants you to eat more," she said, when Alaric finally emerged near noon, looking haggard. "Not less. Specific foods in measured quantities designed to support metabolic function rather than starve it." Alaric lowered himself carefully into his chair. "That makes no sense. Every physician has said, every physician has been wrong." Violetta consulted the document. "Dr. Ashworth believes your body has been in a state of starvation panic, hoarding every calorie because it believes you are dying of famine. He proposes a diet of lean proteins, vegetables, specific grains, and this is peculiar. He emphasizes the importance of consistent meal timing. Your body needs to learn it will be reliably fed. So, I am to eat my way out of obesity? Alaric's tone was bitter. Forgive me if I find that difficult to credit. You are to nourish a broken metabolism back to function, Violetta corrected. There is a difference. But it will require precision. Every meal measured, every ingredient selected for its metabolic properties rather than its palatability. She looked up from the pages. It will require taking over your kitchens entirely. The kitchens? Alaric blinked. Violetta, we employ a French chef who has been with the household for 20 years. Monsieur Beaumont does not take kindly to interference. Then Monsieur Beaumont will have to adjust. She stood, the sheaf of papers in hand. Dr. Ashworth was quite clear. This diet is as important as the thyroid extract itself. I will not have his treatment undermined by a chef too proud to follow medical instructions. She found the kitchens in the basement level, a vast domain of copper pots and brick ovens where Monsieur Beaumont reigned as absolute monarch. He was a compact man with an impressive mustache and the temperamental disposition of an artist whose genius is constantly unappreciated. Your Grace. He looked up from a sauce he was reducing, surprise evident on his florid face. It is most irregular for the mistress to venture into the kitchens. If you have complaints about the meals, I have no complaints about your skill, Monsieur Beaumont, Violetta said, channeling every ounce of Duchess authority she could muster. However, His Grace's physician has prescribed a specific dietary regimen that must be followed precisely. I am here to ensure its implementation. She spread Dr. Ashworth's papers on the central work table, ignoring the scandalized looks from the scullery maids and kitchen staff. Monsieur Beaumont approached with visible reluctance, his eyes scanning the detailed instructions. This is not cuisine, he declared after a moment. This is prison food. Boiled chicken, steamed vegetables, measured portions like a hospital ward? You ask me to disgrace my profession, Your Grace. I ask you to save His Grace's life, Violetta replied. Dr. Ashworth believes the Duke's condition stems from a glandular disorder, not from excess consumption. But the treatment will fail if his diet is not carefully managed. These recommendations are medical necessity, not culinary preference. But cream sauce, butter, proper seasoning, these are what make food worth eating. Monsieur Beaumont gestured dramatically at his domain. You would have me serve bland, tasteless. I would have you serve food designed to heal rather than simply please the palate. Violetta pulled out a specific page. Dr. Ashworth has noted which herbs and spices are acceptable. You may season appropriately within those constraints. He has also provided recipes from Indian cuisine that are both flavorful and metabolically appropriate. This need not be torture, but it must be precise. The chef's mustache quivered with indignation. In all my years, never have I been subjected to such. In all your years, have you watched a man slowly die despite eating the meals you prepared? Violetta's voice sharpened. Because I have been watching exactly that for the past 3 weeks. His Grace follows your beautiful meals with hours of suffering, his heart racing, his body retaining every drop of fluid, his strength fading. Your art is wasted on a body that cannot process it properly. Monsieur Beaumont fell silent, his expression shifting from outrage to something more complex. I do not ask you to abandon your expertise, Violetta continued more gently. I ask you to apply it within new parameters. Dr. Ashworth believes food can be medicine if properly prepared. Surely that is a challenge worthy of your considerable skill? The chef studied the papers again, his finger tracing the recipes and specifications. These Indian dishes, I have never attempted such cuisine. Then you have an opportunity to expand your repertoire. Violetta sensed she was gaining ground. Think of it as an experiment in therapeutic cooking. If His Grace improves under this regimen, you will be able to claim credit for contributing to his recovery. Monsieur Beaumont's eyes gleamed slightly at that. I would need to acquire certain spices. Turmeric, this ginger root. These items are not commonly stocked. Make a list. I will arrange for whatever you require. Violetta pulled out a chair at the work table. Now, let us review the breakfast requirements. Dr. Ashworth specifies, Your Grace cannot sit in the kitchens. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Halston, had appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of horror. It is entirely improper for the Duchess to. The Duchess will sit wherever necessary to ensure her husband's care, Violetta said without looking up. Mrs. Halston, please have a desk and chair moved into the small parlor adjacent to the kitchens. I will be spending considerable time overseeing meal preparation for the foreseeable future. But Your Grace, a lady of your station, is determined to keep her husband alive. Violetta met the housekeeper's eyes. I understand this is irregular, Mrs. Halston. I understand it violates every convention of how a duchess should behave. But His Grace's previous physicians nearly killed him with their conventional wisdom. I will not stand on ceremony while he fades away. Mrs. Halston's expression softened slightly. Very well, Your Grace. I shall have the parlor prepared. She paused at the door. For what it is worth, ma'am, the staff have noticed His Grace seems more hopeful since your arrival. Whatever you are attempting, we wish you success. Over the following week, Violetta transformed the Somerset kitchens into a laboratory of therapeutic nutrition. She worked alongside Monsieur Beaumont, learning to measure portions with apothecary precision, to time meals to exact intervals, to prepare the thyroid extract Dr. Ashworth had sent in a form Alaric could tolerate. The staff's initial resistance gradually shifted to curiosity and then cautious support. The scullery maids began asking questions about which vegetables Dr. Ashworth considered most beneficial. The undercook experimented with the Indian spice combinations, finding ways to coax flavor from the restrictive ingredient list. Even Monsieur Beaumont, once his pride recovered, began treating the therapeutic cuisine as a professional challenge. This ginger, he announced one afternoon. It adds heat without the heaviness of cream. And the turmeric, Dr. Ashworth says it reduces inflammation. Yes? It also provides color most beautiful. Perhaps therapeutic food need not be punishment after all. But the greatest resistance came not from the staff, but from Alaric himself. I cannot eat this, he said on the fourth day, staring at his breakfast of poached eggs, steamed greens, and a small portion of what Dr. Ashworth called metabolic porridge, a mixture of specific grains prepared without sugar or cream. You can and you will, Violetta replied, taking the seat across from him. Dr. Ashworth was clear. The thyroid extract alone is insufficient. Your body needs proper nourishment to heal. I have been on restrictive diets for 8 years, Violetta. I cannot face another meal of measured portions and tasteless. He stopped as he took his first bite, surprise crossing his features. This is not tasteless. Monsieur Beaumont has been experimenting with the approved spices. He has discovered that therapeutic need not mean torturous. She consulted her notes. You are to eat everything on this plate. Then, in precisely 3 hours, you will have a measured snack. Then luncheon at 1 o'clock. The consistency is crucial. You speak like a physician yourself now. I speak like a woman determined to prove Dr. Ashworth's theory correct. She met his eyes. How do you feel this morning? Truly? Alaric considered, taking another bite of the peculiar porridge. Less heavy than usual. My heart is not racing as it typically does after breakfast, though it is too early to attribute that to the diet. Perhaps. But Dr. Ashworth predicted this. He said your body would respond quickly once given proper fuel rather than being starved or overwhelmed. She made a note in her ledger. She had begun keeping her own journal of Alaric's progress, documenting every meal and every symptom. Eat, and then we shall see if you can manage a short walk in the garden before your fatigue sets in. Over the following days, Violetta established a rigid schedule that governed all of Somerset House. Meals at precise intervals. The thyroid extract administered at the same time each morning. Periods of rest balanced with gentle activity. She bullied Alaric into compliance with a firmness that surprised them both, refusing to accept his protests or his despair. "You have spent 8 years doing what the physicians told you," she said, when he complained about the relentless regimen. "Now you will spend 8 weeks doing what I tell you. If there is no improvement, you may return to your resigned decline. But you will give this a fair trial. You have become quite tyrannical, Duchess. I have become quite invested in your survival, Your Grace." She checked his pulse. She had learned to do this from Dr. Ashworth's instructions and noted the rate in her journal. Slower than yesterday, steadier. That is progress. Or wishful thinking. We shall see. She helped him to his feet for their post-breakfast walk. "Come, Monsieur Beaumont has prepared something he calls therapeutic lemon water for you to drink in the garden. Apparently lemon aids digestion without adding problematic sugars." As they walked slowly through the portrait gallery toward the garden doors, Alaric glanced at her. "Why are you doing this, Violetta? You could have simply accepted the generous terms of our arrangement and waited for my inevitable decline. Instead, you have turned my household upside down, alienated my chef, and appointed yourself my medical guardian." Violetta paused at the garden threshold, where morning light streamed through the glass, "because I find I am not content with accepting inevitability when there might be possibility. And because somewhere, my mother is watching, and I think she would approve of me fighting for something, rather than simply enduring it." She opened the door, letting in the scent of roses and fresh earth. "Now come. We have a schedule to keep. And I have promised Monsieur Beaumont we will provide detailed feedback on his therapeutic lemon water. He has become quite competitive about making medicine palatable." Behind them, through the kitchen corridors, the sounds of the Somerset household had shifted. No longer the chaos of conventional service, but the precise choreography of a household bent toward a single purpose, proving that healing was possible, even when 17 physicians had declared it was not. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered not by the regular post, but by a court messenger whose livery bore the seal of the Court of Chancery. Patterson brought it to the breakfast room where Violetta was reviewing the day's menu with Monsieur Beaumont, their relationship having evolved into something approaching mutual respect over the past month. "A legal document for His Grace, Your Grace," Patterson said, his tone carefully neutral in a way that suggested he knew the contents were troubling. "The messenger said it requires immediate attention." Violetta broke the seal and read the first lines, feeling her blood turn to ice. "In the matter of Alaric James Crane, Duke of Somerset. Petition for declaration of mental incapacity and appointment of guardian. Monsieur Beaumont, we shall continue this later," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Patterson, where is His Grace?" "In the garden, Your Grace. He has been walking for 20 minutes. His stamina has improved considerably under your care." Violetta found Alaric on the east terrace, leaning less heavily on his cane than he had a month ago. His color better, his breathing easier. The morning walks had become routine now, part of the strict regimen that was slowly, measurably changing his condition. And now, Lady Agatha threatened to destroy it all. "We have a problem," she said without preamble, handing him the document. Alaric read in silence, his expression darkening with each line. When he finished, he sat heavily on the stone bench, the legal papers trembling slightly in his hands. "She has filed a petition of lunacy," he said flatly. "Lady Agatha, supported by affidavits from 3 physicians I consulted years ago, claims I am mentally unfit to manage my own affairs due to my physical condition and what she terms obsessive fixation on unproven medical theories." "The journals," Violetta breathed. "She is using your meticulous record-keeping as evidence of disordered thinking." "Not just the journals. She has somehow obtained testimony from Dr. Morrison, the physician who prescribed the starvation regimen, claiming I refuse to follow proper medical advice in favor of Eastern quackery promoted by my unduly influential young wife." His voice turned bitter. "Apparently my decision to consult Dr. Ashworth proves I have lost capacity for rational judgment." Violetta snatched the document back, reading more carefully. Lady Agatha's petition was masterfully constructed. She portrayed herself as a concerned family member, horrified by the Duke's deteriorating condition and alarmed by his recent erratic behavior. Dismissing established physicians, allowing his wife to take over household management in unprecedented ways, following experimental treatments that contradicted conventional medical wisdom. The petition requested that the Court of Chancery declare Alaric mentally incapacitated and appoint a guardian to manage his estates and financial affairs until such time as he recovered his faculties, or until his death, whichever came first. Lady Agatha had, naturally, offered herself as the most appropriate guardian, being his wife's closest living relative and therefore having the family's best interests at heart. "This is monstrous," Violetta said. "You are more lucid than any man I have met. Your journals are evidence of scientific rigor, not madness. The law does not always distinguish between the two." Alaric stood, pacing slowly. "If the court appoints Lady Agatha as my guardian, she will have complete control of my fortune. She will dismiss Dr. Ashworth, end your dietary regimen, and likely return me to the care of physicians who will bleed and purge me into an early grave." Can she actually succeed? Surely the court will see through her motivations. The court will see a young woman who married a notoriously ill duke and within weeks began implementing radical changes to his household and medical care. Alaric's voice was grim. They will see a man whose physical condition is undeniable and whose recent choices do appear unconventional. Lady Agatha has constructed a narrative that will be persuasive to men who believe wives should not interfere in medical matters and that Eastern medicine is inherently suspicious. Violetta felt fury rising in her chest. "When is the hearing?" 3 weeks. At the Court of Chancery in London. He met her eyes. "Violetta, if they rule against me, our protective covenant becomes meaningless. Lady Agatha will control everything, including you. She could force you back under her guardianship, arguing that, as my wife, you require protection from your own poor judgment in supporting my delusions. Then we must ensure they do not rule against you." Violetta's mind was already racing through possibilities. "We need evidence. Documented proof that Dr. Ashworth's treatment is working, that you are improving rather than declining, that your decision to pursue alternative medicine was rational rather than evidence of incapacity." "I have improved," Alaric admitted. "I feel stronger than I have in years. But 3 weeks is hardly enough time to demonstrate lasting change. The weight loss has been minimal, perhaps half a stone, hardly dramatic evidence." "Weight is not the only measure." Violetta pulled out her own journal, the one she had been keeping since Dr. Ashworth's first visit. Your resting heart rate has decreased from 95 beats per minute to 78. Your ankle swelling has reduced by measurable degrees. I have been tracking the circumference. Your stamina has improved dramatically. You walked for 20 minutes this morning without stopping, when a month ago you could barely manage 5. Will a court care about ankle circumference and walking distances? They will, if we present it properly. Violetta was pacing now, her breakfast forgotten. We need Dr. Ashworth to testify. We need your journals to be presented not as evidence of obsession, but as the scientific documentation of a rational man seeking to understand his own condition. We need witnesses who can attest to your improved mental clarity and physical function. And who will testify to that? The servants? Lady Agatha will dismiss their testimony as biased loyalty. Then we need someone whose testimony cannot be dismissed. Violetta stopped pacing, an idea forming. What about your steward? Mr. Pemberton has been managing estate business with you for how long? 15 years? And has your capacity for business judgment declined in that time? Alaric considered. No. If anything, I have become more meticulous about estate management. The physical limitations have forced me to be more efficient with my time and energy. Then we have Pemberton testify to your continued competency in business matters. We have Dr. Ashworth explain the medical science behind his treatment and why your decision to pursue it was rational. We have the documented evidence of improvement. Violetta's voice grew stronger. And we have me. You? I am your wife. I have been intimately involved in your care. I can testify that you are not under any delusion, that you made informed choices about your medical treatment, that your mental faculties are entirely sound. She met his eyes. Lady Agatha wants to paint me as an unduly influential young wife leading you astray. Let us instead show the court a duchess fighting to save her husband's life with every tool available. They will question your objectivity. Of course they will. But they cannot question my observations. I have documented everything: meals, symptoms, improvements, setbacks. I have data, Alaric. Scientific data that supports Dr. Ashworth's approach. She gripped the legal document. Lady Agatha thinks she can use your intelligence against you. She thinks your careful record-keeping makes you appear mad. We will show them it makes you a natural philosopher, investigating his own condition with rigor and reason. Alaric was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You realize that if we fight this and lose, the consequences for you could be severe? Lady Agatha will ensure you are punished for supporting me. And if we do not fight, you will be declared incompetent and subjected to treatments that will kill you within months. Violetta's voice was fierce. I did not spend the last month revolutionizing your household and bullying French chefs only to surrender to my aunt's greed without a battle. A smile ghosted across Alaric's features. You have changed, Duchess. The trembling girl I married would never have spoken thus. The trembling girl you married had never had anything worth fighting for. She straightened her shoulders. Now I do. So we shall fight. We shall gather every piece of evidence, call every witness, and demonstrate to the Court of Chancery that the Duke of Somerset is entirely competent, and that his wife is not some naive child, but a woman capable of defending her household. Very well. Alaric stood with visible effort, though less than he would have needed a month ago. We fight, but we do it intelligently. I will engage the best solicitor in London, Mr. William Hartley, who specializes in chancery proceedings. You will compile your documentation into a format the court can understand. And we will pray that 3 weeks of continued improvement is enough to counter years of decline. It will have to be. Violetta took his arm as they walked back toward the house. Because Lady Agatha has made one critical error in her petition. What is that? She assumed I would be too meek to oppose her, that I would accept her authority as I always have. Violetta's voice hardened. But I am not the frightened girl she sold into marriage anymore. I am the Duchess of Somerset, and I will not surrender my husband or my household to her machinations. They entered the house together, and Violetta immediately began issuing instructions to Patterson. Dr. Ashworth must be contacted immediately. Mr. Pemberton must be briefed on the situation. Every servant who had witnessed Alaric's improvement must be prepared to testify if needed. The journals must be organized and indexed for presentation. Your Grace, Patterson ventured, if I may, the staff stands ready to support His Grace in any way necessary. We have all observed his remarkable improvement under your care. If testimony is required, you will find the household united. Thank you, Patterson. That unity may prove crucial in the days ahead. She turned to Alaric. You should rest. This afternoon, we meet with Mr. Hartley. Tonight, we begin preparing our defense in earnest. As Alaric made his way slowly to his study, Violetta stood in the entrance hall, Lady Agatha's legal petition clutched in her hand. Her aunt had thought to use the law as a weapon, to seize control through manipulation of judicial process. But Lady Agatha had forgotten one essential truth. Violetta had spent the last month learning to fight battles others thought unwinnable. If her aunt wanted war, she would discover that the Duchess of Somerset was no longer the compliant girl who could be threatened into submission. She was a woman who had taken on the entire medical establishment and an entrenched French chef, and won. The Court of Chancery, Violetta decided, would be just one more impossible battle to win. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and cold. London wrapped in November fog that turned the city into a landscape of shadows. But inside Somerset House, a different kind of transformation had occurred over the past 3 weeks. One that even Violetta had not fully anticipated. She woke before dawn, as had become her habit, and made her way to Alaric's chambers to review his morning measurements before the thyroid extract was administered. She knocked softly, expecting to find him still abed as usual, requiring Patterson's assistance to rise. Instead, the door opened immediately, and Alaric stood before her, fully dressed, his color better than she had seen it in all their weeks of marriage. You are awake, she said, startled. And dressed. Without assistance? I woke at 5 and found I had the energy to manage my own toilet. He stepped back to let her enter, and she noticed immediately what was different. His movements were smoother, less labored. The careful negotiation with his own body had become simply movement. Patterson nearly fainted when he arrived to find me already dressed and reviewing the documents for today's hearing. Violetta moved to the measurement ledger she had been keeping, but Alaric stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. Before you begin your scientific observations, Duchess, there is something I wish to show you. His eyes held an expression she had not seen before, something approaching joy. Come. He led her through the corridors of Somerset House, not to the study or the library, but toward the grand staircase that descended to the entrance hall. Violetta watched, her breath catching, as Alaric descended the stairs with steady, measured steps, without once touching the banister for support, without pausing to rest on the landings, without the cane that had been his constant companion. Your Grace, she whispered. Where is your cane? In my chambers. I found I did not need it this morning. He reached the bottom of the stairs and turned to look up at her, his expression almost boyish. Violetta, For the first time in 8 years, I walked down these stairs without counting each step as a potential catastrophe, without calculating rest points, without fear that my legs would give way beneath me. She descended quickly, meeting him at the bottom, and without thinking reached out to check his pulse. His heart beat steady and strong beneath her fingertips. None of the racing irregularity that had marked the early weeks of their marriage. "The fluid retention has decreased dramatically," she observed, noting how his face had changed, the sharp edges of his bone structure emerging from the puffiness that had obscured them. "Your ankles, may I?" He extended his leg with an ease that would have been impossible a month ago, and she saw that the chronic swelling that had made his evening shoes unbearable had nearly vanished. The skin was no longer tight and shiny with excess fluid, but normal, healthy. Dr. Ashworth predicted this might happen if the thyroid function improved sufficiently, Alaric said. He called it metabolic awakening, the point where the body begins to release the excess fluid it has been hoarding and the energy returns. I did not believe it would be so dramatic. "How much weight have you lost?" Violetta asked, reaching for her measurement tape. "Nearly 2 stone in the past week alone. But Violetta, it is not merely the weight. I feel..." He paused, seeming to search for words adequate to the experience. "I feel like myself again. Like the man I was before this condition took hold. My mind is clearer. My body responds when I ask it to move. The constant fatigue that has shadowed me for years has lifted like morning fog." Violetta completed her measurements, documenting everything in her ledger with hands that trembled slightly. The numbers confirmed what her eyes could see. Alaric's body had fundamentally shifted in the past 3 weeks. The circumference of his waist had decreased by 4 inches. His resting heart rate had dropped to a normal 68 beats per minute. His blood pressure, which Dr. Ashworth had taught her to measure, had normalized. "This is extraordinary," she breathed. "This is exactly what we need for the hearing. Objective, measurable proof that Dr. Ashworth's treatment is not quackery, but genuine medical innovation." "Yes. But first," Alaric extended his hand to her. "First, I wish to do something I have been unable to do since before you were born. Walk in my own gardens. Truly walk, not the shuffling, exhausting struggles of recent weeks. Will you join me?" The request was so earnest, so unlike the resigned, bitter man she had married, that Violetta felt tears prick her eyes. She placed her hand in his. "I would be honored, Your Grace." They exited through the garden doors, and the November morning greeted them with crisp air and the scent of dying leaves. The Somerset Gardens stretched before them, formal parterres giving way to wilder woodland paths that Violetta had never explored because Alaric could not navigate their uneven terrain. "Where shall we go?" she asked. "To the old oak," Alaric said, pointing toward a distant path that disappeared into a grove of ancient trees. "It was my favorite place as a boy. I have not been able to reach it in 5 years." They walked together down the terrace steps Alaric descended with casual confidence rather than white-knuckled determination, and onto the gravel path. Violetta kept glancing at him, watching for signs of fatigue or distress. But he moved with increasing ease, his stride lengthening as they left the formal gardens behind. "You are staring at me as though I might shatter," he observed with amusement. "I am watching for symptoms. It is habit now." "What symptoms do you observe?" Violetta considered. "Your breathing is even. Your color is good. Your gait is steady. You are not leaning on my arm for support, but simply holding my hand." She looked up at him. "You are well, Alaric. Not cured, perhaps, but genuinely well, for the first time since I have known you." They reached the woodland path, where fallen leaves carpeted the ground in shades of copper and gold. Here, away from the manicured formality of the gardens, the estate felt wild and alive. Alaric led her deeper into the grove, navigating exposed roots and uneven ground with the sure-footedness of a man who had walked these paths as a boy. "There," he said finally, and Violetta saw it. An oak so ancient and massive it seemed to predate the house itself, its branches spreading like a cathedral ceiling above them. A bench had been placed beneath it, weathered but still solid. They sat together, and for a long moment neither spoke. The silence was peaceful rather than awkward, filled with birdsong and the whisper of wind through bare branches. "I had forgotten what this felt like," Alaric said finally. "To move through the world without constant negotiation with my own body. To walk more than 100 yards without needing to rest. To breathe without my lungs burning." He turned to look at her. "You gave this back to me, Violetta. You and your stubborn refusal to accept the inevitable." "Dr. Ashworth gave it back to you," she corrected. "I simply ensured you had the opportunity to try his treatment. You did far more than that. You revolutionized my household. You faced down my chef, my physicians, and your own aunt's schemes. You documented my progress with scientific precision and fought for me when I had given up fighting for myself." His voice roughened with emotion. "I married you out of duty to your mother. But somewhere in these past weeks, you have become far more than an obligation I honored." Violetta felt her heart quicken. "What have I become?" "My partner, my advocate, my—" He hesitated, then continued with quiet intensity. "My friend. Perhaps more, if you would permit such a thing, between us." She studied his face, no longer obscured by the puffiness of fluid retention. The sharp intelligence in his eyes now matched by the clean lines of his features. He was handsome, she realized, not in the conventional way of society dandies, but in the way of a man who had endured suffering and emerged stronger for it. "I think," she said carefully, "that we have already moved beyond the simple protective covenant you initially proposed. Partners, certainly. Friends, increasingly. As for more—" She met his eyes. "Let us see what the future brings, now that you have one again." Alaric smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his entire countenance. "Then let us return to the house and prepare to defend that future before the Court of Chancery. Lady Agatha is about to discover that her petition of incapacity faces a rather significant obstacle." "What obstacle is that?" "A duke who can walk into that courtroom without assistance, speak with perfect lucidity, and demonstrate through documented evidence that his decision to pursue unconventional treatment was not only rational, but brilliantly successful." He stood, extending his hand to help her rise. "Come, Duchess. We have a battle to win." They walked back through the woodland path, their pace easy and unhurried. Violetta noticed that Alaric's breathing remained even, his energy sustained even as they climbed the slight incline back to the formal gardens. The man who had struggled to navigate his own ballroom now moved through the world with the confidence of someone who trusted his body to obey him. As they approached the house, Patterson stood at the garden doors, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the Duke walking without his cane, his step light and sure. "Your Grace," the butler said, emotion evident in his voice. "The carriage is ready for your journey to London. And, may I say, sir, it is very good to see you so well." "Thank you, Patterson. It is very good to feel well." Alaric paused at the threshold. "Has Mr. Hartley arrived?" "He awaits you in the study, along with Dr. Ashworth." They wish to review the final preparations before you depart. Excellent. Violetta, will you join us? In a moment. I need to collect my documentation ledgers. She squeezed his hand once before releasing it. Go. Demonstrate to Mr. Hartley that his client is far more capable than Lady Agatha's petition suggests. As Alaric strode into the house with confident steps, Violetta stood for a moment in the garden, breathing the cold November air and marveling at what 3 weeks of proper treatment had accomplished. Dr. Ashworth's thyroid extract and therapeutic diet had not worked miracles. Alaric was not suddenly transformed into the athletic young soldier of his portrait. But he had been given back his life, his autonomy, his future. And today, before the Court of Chancery, they would prove that the choice to pursue that future had been made by a man of perfect soundness and rational judgment. Lady Agatha's vultures, Violetta thought with grim satisfaction, were about to go very hungry indeed. The Court of Chancery hearing had lasted 4 hours. Lady Agatha's solicitor had presented his case with oily confidence, painting a picture of a deteriorating duke led astray by an inexperienced wife and a charlatan physician peddling Eastern mysticism. He had called witnesses, Dr. Morrison, who testified to Alaric's obstinate refusal to follow proper medical advice. Lady Weatherly, who claimed the Duke had appeared confused and disoriented at social functions. Even a shopkeeper who swore Alaric had once ordered excessive quantities of sweets, proving his lack of self-control. Then Mr. Hartley had stood, and the tide had turned. Dr. Ashworth had testified for 90 minutes, explaining thyroid function with such clarity that even the elderly judges had begun to nod in understanding. He had presented medical journals from Vienna and Edinburgh supporting his theories, transforming Eastern mysticism into emerging endocrinological science. Mr. Pemberton had documented 15 years of increasingly astute business decisions, proving Alaric's mental acuity had never wavered despite his physical decline. But the moment that had sealed their victory was when Alaric himself had stood to address the court. He had walked to the witness stand without assistance, had spoken for 20 minutes with perfect lucidity about his condition and his rational decision to pursue treatment that addressed root causes rather than symptoms. He had presented his own journals, not as evidence of obsession, but as the meticulous scientific documentation of a natural philosopher investigating a medical mystery. And when Lady Agatha's solicitor had attempted to suggest the recent improvement was temporary or fabricated, Alaric had calmly removed his coat and asked the court physician to examine him on the spot. The physician's testimony had been damning to Lady Agatha's case. This man exhibits no signs of mental incapacity. His physical condition, while still requiring management, shows remarkable improvement. His decision to pursue Dr. Ashworth's treatment appears to have been not only rational, but medically sound. The judges had retired for less than 30 minutes before returning with their verdict. Petition denied. The Duke of Somerset was found to be of sound mind and fully capable of managing his own affairs. Lady Agatha had fled the courtroom without a word, her face a mask of fury. That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, on the first night of December, the Duke and Duchess of Somerset stood before the entrance to Ravenshire Castle, where the final ball of the season was being held. It was the same ballroom where Violetta had first appeared as a bride, trembling under pitying whispers. Tonight would be different. "Are you ready?" Alaric asked, offering his arm. He wore evening dress of midnight blue that had been tailored just last week to accommodate his transformed physique. The excess weight had continued to diminish as Dr. Ashworth's treatment progressed. He would never be the lean soldier of his youth. But he had regained a dignity of form that matched his dignity of bearing. "I am ready," Violetta replied, resplendent in a gown of deep crimson silk that had been her own choice, not her aunt's. She had discovered she quite liked the color. It suited a woman who had taken on the medical establishment and won. The major domo struck his staff against the marble floor. His Grace, the Duke of Somerset, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Somerset. The ballroom fell silent as it had at their wedding. But the quality of that silence was entirely different. Then, it had been the quiet of vultures gathering. Now, it was the hush of astonishment. Alaric descended the grand staircase with Violetta on his arm, his steps sure and confident, no cane in sight. The transformation was visible to everyone who had seen him 3 months ago, the fluid retention gone, the labored breathing absent, the pallor replaced by healthy color. He moved like a duke rather than an invalid, and the effect on the assembled guests was electric. "Good Lord," someone whispered. "Is that truly Somerset? He looks, well, actually well. I heard the Court of Chancery ruled him perfectly competent. Lady Agatha's petition was utterly rejected." Violetta caught sight of Lady Winterbourne, whose poor child whispers had stung so deeply at the wedding. The woman's fan had stopped mid-flutter, her expression one of shocked reassessment. They reached the ballroom floor, and Lord Ashford, who had made the cruel toast at their wedding, approached with visible uncertainty. "Your Grace, Your Grace," he bowed, considerably more respectful than he had been months ago. "May I say you are looking remarkably well, Somerset. The reports of your recovery have been the talk of London." "Thank you, Ashford." Alaric's tone was coolly polite. "I find that proper medical treatment works wonders when one is fortunate enough to find a physician who addresses causes rather than simply assigning blame." The rebuke was gentle but unmistakable. Lord Ashford flushed and withdrew. Lady Pemberton, their hostess, swept forward with considerably more grace. "Your Graces, we are delighted you could attend. Duke Somerset, I must confess the change in you is quite extraordinary. London has spoken of little else since the Chancery hearing." "The credit belongs to my wife," Alaric said, his hand covering Violetta's where it rested on his arm. "She refused to accept the conventional wisdom that my condition was untreatable. Her determination saved my life." "How remarkable." Lady Pemberton's gaze turned to Violetta with new assessment. "You are quite the formidable Duchess, my dear. Taking on the entire medical establishment at 18, such courage is rare at any age." "I simply refuse to watch my husband fade away when there might be hope," Violetta replied. "Any wife would do the same." "I rather think they would not," Lady Pemberton smiled. "Most would have accepted the physician's pronouncements and prepared for elegant widowhood. You chose to fight. That takes a particular kind of strength." As Lady Pemberton moved away to greet other guests, the whispers intensified around them. "Did you hear how she took over his household? Dismissed all the traditional treatments? They say she personally managed his diet, worked in the kitchens like a duchess who acts rather than simply ornaments. Imagine that. And she's barely 19. The determination in one so young." The orchestra began a waltz, and Alaric turned to Violetta. "I believe, Duchess, that this dance belongs to us, as the last one did." "You need not prove anything more tonight," Violetta said quietly. "Everyone can see you are well." "I am not dancing to prove my health." His eyes held hers. "I am dancing because I wish to. Because I can. Because 3 months ago I thought I would never hold my wife in a waltz without fearing I would collapse at her feet." He led her onto the floor, and as the music swelled, they began to move. Alaric's hand at her waist was firm and sure, his steps confident. They swept across the polished marble, and Violetta realized with a start that he was actually leading her, not merely surviving the dance, but truly dancing with skill and grace. "You have been practicing," she accused. "Patterson has been helping me in the gallery. I wanted to surprise you." He smiled. "I wanted to give you at least one memory of our marriage that was not about medical treatments and court battles." Around them, the other couples had slowed their own dances to watch. The transformation from the struggling, pitied duke of the wedding feast to this confident, capable man was too dramatic to ignore. And Violetta, in her crimson gown, no longer looked like the trembling, sacrificial lamb of society's cruel whispers. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had fought for what she wanted and won. "Poor Violetta," someone murmured near the edge of the dance floor. "Poor?" another voice replied sharply. "Look at her. Look at them both. That is not a woman to be pitied. That is a duchess who bent the entire ton to her will. She saved his life, they say. Defied every physician in London. Faced down Lady Agatha in open court and won. The Somerset Pride, they're calling her now. Have you not heard?" Violetta caught fragments of the whispers, and for the first time since entering society, she found she did not mind being discussed. Let them talk. Let them marvel. She had earned their astonishment. The waltz ended, and Alaric led her from the floor to genuine applause, not the mocking courtesy of their wedding, but real appreciation for the spectacle they had provided. A duke restored, and a duchess who had orchestrated that restoration. Dr. Ashworth appeared at their side, having been invited as their guest. "Remarkable," he said quietly. 3 months ago, you could barely cross a room. Tonight you waltz. This will be documented in my next paper for the Lancet." "Make certain you credit the Duchess appropriately," Alaric said. "Your treatment provided the medicine, but her determination provided the structure that made it effective." "Oh, I shall. In fact, I have been approached by 3 other families with similar cases since news of your recovery spread. It seems your success has opened minds that were previously closed to metabolic theories." Dr. Ashworth smiled. "You have done more for advancing medical understanding than a dozen academic papers, Your Grace." As the evening progressed, Violetta found herself surrounded by society matrons who had previously either ignored her or whispered pity. Now they sought her company, asked her advice, treated her with the respect due to a duchess who had proven herself formidable. "You must tell me," Lady Hartwell said, drawing Violetta aside, "how you managed to convince Somerset to try such unconventional treatment. My own husband suffers from similar lethargy and swelling, but he refuses to see anyone except our family physician, who simply tells him to eat less." "I presented him with evidence," Violetta replied, "and I refused to accept that his condition was untreatable simply because conventional physicians lacked understanding. If you wish, I can provide you with Dr. Ashworth's direction." "Would you?" "Oh, that would be most kind." As Violetta provided the information, she caught sight of a familiar figure standing alone near the refreshment table. Lady Agatha, dressed in mourning gray despite having lost no one, watched the proceedings with an expression of pure venom. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Violetta did not look away, did not flinch. Instead, she raised her chin slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and dismissal in equal measure. "You tried to destroy us," that look said. "You failed. We endure." Lady Agatha turned and left the ballroom without a word. "Your aunt appears displeased," Alaric observed, appearing at Violetta's side with champagne. "My aunt appears defeated," Violetta corrected. "There is a difference. She accepted the glass. She gambled that you would die or be declared incompetent, and she could control me through either widowhood or guardianship. Instead, you live and thrive, and I have discovered I quite enjoy being a duchess with actual power. The Somerset pride, Alaric quoted with amusement. Is that truly what they are calling you? Apparently. Do you object? I find it perfectly appropriate. He touched his glass to hers. To the Somerset pride, the Duchess who refused to accept the inevitable and changed the future through sheer stubborn determination. To partnership, Violetta countered, between a duke brave enough to trust unconventional wisdom and a duchess brave enough to implement it. They drank, and as the orchestra struck up another waltz, Alaric extended his hand once more. Again? Violetta asked. Again. And again after that, if you will permit it. I have 8 years of missed dances to make up for, Duchess. We might as well begin tonight. She placed her hand in his, and they returned to the floor. This time no one stared in pity or shock. This time, the whispers that followed them were of admiration and respect. The Duke and Duchess of Somerset, the ballroom agreed, had proven themselves a force to be reckoned with, individually formidable, together unstoppable. As they waltzed beneath the chandeliers of Ravenshire Castle, Violetta caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She barely recognized the confident woman in crimson who moved with such assurance through the steps. That trembling girl in white lace seemed a lifetime ago, though it had been mere months. She had been sold into marriage to save her family's debts. She had been meant to be a temporary wife, a placeholder warming a chair until death claimed its due. Instead, she had become the Somerset pride. And as Alaric smiled down at her, truly smiled, with the warmth of genuine affection rather than resigned duty, Violetta realized their protective covenant had transformed into something neither had anticipated on that wedding night in the library. It had become a true partnership, and possibly, just possibly, the beginning of love. My sweet family, if you watched Violetta transform from a terrified 18-year-old into the Somerset pride and you still haven't subscribed, please do now. You just experienced an entire character arc, a medical mystery, a courtroom battle, a kitchen revolution, and a romance. And you're going to let YouTube just not show you stories like this anymore? That's what happens when you don't subscribe. The algorithm assumes you don't care. And if this story made you feel literally any emotion, anger at Lady Agatha, hope for Alaric, pride in Violetta, hit that like button. It takes half a second, and it tells me to write more stories about women who refuse to accept what society tells them is inevitable. Share this with someone who needs to hear that fighting for what matters is worth it, even when 17 experts tell you you're wrong. Because that's what this story is really about. Choosing hope over resignation, action over acceptance, and partnership over isolation. Don't just watch and disappear. Subscribe, like, comment, and tell me which part hit you hardest. Be part of this community. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another powerful story from our channel. Click it and let yourself be surprised by even more unforgettable emotions. With love, the Victorian Royal Stories team.